back, everyone. It's the Bourbon Judge. Happy end of the week. I can't believe the weekend is gone. Unfortunately for me personally, no golf, no football today, no nothing. The only thing I've been doing all day long, well, really the entire weekend, is just straight up studying. I think I mentioned a couple months ago, you guys know, a lot of people know, I'm in school, going back to get my executive MBA, and this weekend's just been a lot of schoolwork, so I have to find some way to enjoy myself, so I'm going to enjoy it with you, and then I'm going to enjoy it with some George C. Stagg. All right, so let's kind of go ahead and jump into this week, right? So I wanted to go ahead and review the 2020 George C. Stagg, right? So I'll break it into two different segments. First, let's talk about the man, and then I'll come over and talk a little bit about, the Buffalo Trace now and the antique collection and George C. Stagg, all right? Okay, so who is George C. Stagg? So first and foremost, go back to like the late 1800s. He was a whiskey salesman, and he was selling OFC whiskey bourbon, right? At one point in time, he decided to partner with this guy. You may have heard of him before, E.H. Taylor. Yes, he did. They partnered together, and they actually bought the OFC Distillery, ended up partnering together, and they owned it for a while, right? Fast forward, E.H. Taylor kind of stepped aside, did his own thing, and George C. Stagg owned it by himself. And then when he kind of went off and kind of, let's call it retired, if you will, they ended up naming it the George C. Stagg Distillery in the early 1900s, right? Obviously, like anything else with bourbon and distilleries, fast forward in time, changes names. And now the George C. Stagg George C. Stagg Distillery is now known as the Buffalo Trace Distillery. So that's where that whole namesake comes from and so forth, right? Hence the reason why back in 2002, Buffalo Trace started to put out not only the antique collection, but primarily they added the George C. Stagg, right, as part of the antique collection. So since 2002, every year in the fall, it comes out, always comes out. When you think of George C. Stagg, you think of a couple things, right? Number one is always aged for at least 15 years. The 2020 version is 15 years and 4 months. It's always straight up, just barrel strength, uncut, unfiltered bourbon, right? It goes from the barrel directly to the bottle into my glass and yours, right? So that's really the kind of all the insight in terms of, George C. Stagg. So when you think of George C. Stagg as a whole, this one's definitely on the pricey side, if you will. MSRP is about $100, $125, depending on where you live. But we all know out there, let's be crystal clear, right? Straight up, right? As my manager Mike always says, real talk. It's for sure, straight up, you will not find this 99% of the time at retail, unless one of your local connects hooks you up and helps you, right? For me, oddly enough, I did not get this through my local connect. I was that 1% lucky chance. So how did I get this, right? Cool story. My wife went to get her nails done, right? She comes back, shows me this bottle in a bag. I'm thinking, oh, okay, it's 1792 or, Old Forester. It was not. It was George C. Stagg. So she got it a little bit over retail, closer to about $200. But honestly, George C. Stagg at $200, even though it was more than MSRP, that was definitely worth it. And I'm glad she came home with it versus not coming home with it and telling me how much it costs. So shout out to Mrs. Judge for hooking me up. That was an early Christmas present from her. So I appreciate it. All right, enough talking. Let's start popping. Let's roll. All right. So when you think of George C. Stagg, a couple things come to mind also in addition. Obviously being uncut, unfiltered, you're going to get typically those traditional notes from bourbon, right? So I kind of get into the nose. Gosh, this is so lovely. I mean, it's really, really lovely. You have traditional notes, caramel, brown sugar, maple syrup, cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla, the oak from the barrel from the aging process. I mean, it all goes so nice together. Wow, very, very nice. All right. Last thing I probably should mention before I kind of get into the palate. A lot of times, people ask, hey, Bourbon Judge, I've seen it in the liquor stores, always priced up, But how do I know if I'm getting the 2020 version versus 2019 and so forth, right? So again, on the front of the bottle, as you can tell, this one here is 130.4 proof, right? So if you Google George C. Stagg by release date, it always goes by the proof. So the 130.4 is the 2020 version, all right? And I will say, I'm hoping that this year is better than last year's, because the 2019 version, unfortunately, it was not that great, right? Hence the reason why everyone started to get Stagg Junior Batch 12, because the 2019 George C. Stagg was a no-no. So I think this one might come back as the George C. Stagg that we all know and trust and love. All right, folks, as we always say, thank you for watching the channel. Salute. If you haven't done thus far, please make sure you also subscribe. Cheers. Whew. That is nice. That is really nice. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and give a judgment. I think it's pretty clear, but I want to talk about it a little bit, right? So the judgment is in. This is a buy. I'm going to tell you the reason why it's a buy and why it's slightly better than its little brother, Stagg Jr. All right. So why is it better than this guy here on my right, your left, Stagg Jr.? Primarily, it's just way more well-rounded. Stagg Jr. is very, very good, especially being that you can typically find it much easier than George C. Stagg. Stagg Jr. is really good, but it's just almost too smoky in a way, right? I mean, very good, very robust, but it's not as smooth out, I guess, as George C. Stagg, right? George C. Stagg is just way more refined as a bourbon as a whole. I mean, extremely more refined. This one went down, even though it's 130 proof, it went down super smooth. I mean, I felt it. I'm still feeling it right now, but it went down super smooth. It's so well-rounded, and everything transferred from the nose to the palate. This is some solid, solid juice. I say that because even though it might be very hard to find and to buy, obviously at a reasonable price, worst case, find it at your local bars, your local restaurants, whenever they open back up, right? And hopefully you have a chance to enjoy at least a 1 or 2 ounce pour. Obviously, I enjoyed a lot of it. I did have one of my friends over, my man Brian came over. We set this bad boy to kind of celebrate a little bit. And obviously we liked it a lot, as you can tell. So again, bourbon's all about, sharing it with your friends, people that love bourbon just as much as you do. So cheers everyone out there. I appreciate you guys and gals for watching the channel. And until next week, peace.